In an ornate Viennese palace in 1770, gasps echoed through the royal court as a mysterious turban-clad automaton made its opening chess move against a human challenger. The life-sized mechanical figure, styled as a sorcerer in luxurious Ottoman robes, sat behind a wooden cabinet topped with a chessboard. With a whir of clockwork, the automaton's wooden hand lifted a pawn and advanced it across the board, seemingly thinking for itself. This uncanny machine would go on to defeat eminent figures of the age, even legends like Benjamin Franklin and Napoleon Bonaparte. For over 80 years, this contraption toured Europe and America, astonishing audiences as the world's first chess-playing robot. Yet behind the awe and applause lay one of history's most elaborate hoaxes. This is the story of the mystery of the mechanical Turk, what it was, who built it, what it did, and how it fooled the world. But before we go on, this machine was no ordinary fraud, and as it turns out, it would directly inspire the creation of the first mechanical computer and lead to the information age. The Mechanical Turk was a fake chess-playing machine that captivated the public from the late 18th century into the mid-19th century. At first glance, it appeared to be an ingenious automaton capable of autonomously playing games of chess against human opponents. The machine consisted of a life-sized model of a man with a wax face, black beard, and gray eyes, dressed in rich Turkish garments, including a turban and robes. Seated at a large wooden cabinet about 3.5 feet long, the figure had one hand resting on the cabinet and the other holding a long pipe when idle. On top of the cabinet was a standard chessboard, and a drawer in the cabinet could be opened to reveal an elegant ivory chess set ready for play. To begin exhibitions, the presenter would dramatically open various doors on the cabinet, revealing an intricate maze of gears and clockwork inside. This was a piece of showmanship, as if to prove no person could hide within. After closing the panels and ostensibly winding a key, the automaton would come to life. Its head swiveled side to side, surveying the board, and its clockwork arm reached out to move chess pieces with surprising dexterity. The effect was eerily convincing. To spectators in an age before computers, the Mechanical Turk truly looked like a thinking machine playing chess. Despite its convincing performance, the Turk was in fact a mechanical illusion, a cleverly designed cabinet that concealed a human chess master operating the machinery. To observers, it seemed like pure clockwork genius, but hidden within its wooden cabinet was a secret compartment where a person would hide to guide the automaton's moves. The elaborate interior was engineered to mislead onlookers. Opening one side of the cabinet showed dense gears. Opening another revealed an empty space, all to suggest the machine's insides were fully visible and free of trickery. Through levers and a pegboard-like apparatus, the concealed operator could see the moves on a small internal chessboard. The operator could then control the Turk's arm to mirror moves on the external board. This deception was maintained in absolute secrecy for decades. To the world, the Mechanical Turk seemed an automaton savant, an early robotic marvel, when in truth it was a masterful magic trick in the guise of scientific innovation. The Mechanical Turk was the brainchild of Wolfgang von Kempelen, a Hungarian-born inventor and engineer at the Habsburg court. The story of its origin is nearly as intriguing as the machine itself. It began in 1769 when Kempelen attended a magic show at the court of Empress Maria Theresa of Austria. Unimpressed by one illusionist's performance, Kempelen boldly proclaimed to the Empress that he could create a spectacle far more wondrous. Little did this unknown illusionist know he had kicked off one of the most fascinating butterfly effects in history, but I'll come back to that shortly. Taking her up on the challenge, and given 6 months to deliver, Kempelen returned in 1770 with his astonishing chess-playing automaton. Officially called the automaton chess player at first, This invention was quickly nicknamed the Turk due to its appearance. Kempelen's initial demonstration for Maria Theresa was a sensation. In the Grand Hall of Vienna's Schönbrunn Palace, he unveiled the automaton and invited courtiers to play against it. Kempelen opened the cabinet doors to display whirring clockwork, then wound up the machine and commenced a chess match. The automaton not only made legal moves, but did so decisively and cleverly. It won game after game against all challengers in the court, leaving the Empress and her guests astonished. By all appearances, Kempelen had delivered on his promise to outshine the previous magician's tricks. He had produced a lifelike machine that seemingly thought on its own, capturing the Enlightenment era's fascination with automatons and intellectual curiosities. However, Kempelen himself was not initially keen on a career as a showman. An accomplished civil servant and inventor, as well as a nobleman, Kempelen regarded the Turk as a novelty rather than his life's work. After the initial buzz of the 1770 demonstration, he dismantled and stored the machine, treating it almost like a party trick that had served its purpose. It wasn't until years later, after Maria Theresa's death, that the Hungarian nobleman was pressed to resurrect his automaton. Her son, Emperor Joseph II, had heard whispers of the marvelous chess machine and requested that it be brought back to entertain visiting dignitaries. Complying with the emperor's wish, Kempelen refurbished the mechanical Turk and embarked on a tour of Europe in the 1780s, reluctantly stepping into the role of an itinerant showman. Once on tour, the mechanical Turk proved an enduring crowd puller. It traveled through Europe, leaving a trail of defeated challengers and amazed audiences. In 1783, Kempelen took the automaton to Paris and created a stir among the French intelligentsia. It was here that one of America's founding fathers, Benjamin Franklin, sat down across from the inscrutable automaton. Franklin, an avid chess enthusiast, was serving as the American ambassador in France at the time. The statesman was reportedly enthralled by the automaton's prowess as it cleaned up against him on the chessboard. Not long after, the world's strongest chess player of the period, François-André Philidor, also challenged the mechanical Turk. Philidor managed to defeat the machine in a celebrated 1793 match in Paris, but even he declared the contest one of the most difficult games he had ever played. The fact that the automaton could give a grandmaster of Philidor's caliber a run for his money only heightened the Turk's mystique. Over the ensuing decades, the mechanical Turk's reputation grew as it continued to engage in high-profile games. It toured the courts and cities of England, Germany, and beyond, often vanquishing local chess champions. Wherever it went, newspapers and patrons heralded it as an infallible machine or a wonder of artificial reason. Perhaps the most famous encounter took place in 1809, when Napoleon Bonaparte, by then Emperor of the French, arranged a match against the Turk in Schönbrunn Palace. The match with Napoleon has become legendary. As an intrigued Napoleon sat to play, he attempted to test the automaton's limits and perhaps cheat a little. In their game, Napoleon deliberately made an illegal move early on, placing his piece in a way not allowed by chess rules. The mechanical Turk, seemingly unperturbed, responded by calmly returning Napoleon's piece to its original position, refusing to accept the illegal move. Amused, the emperor tried a second illegal move. This time, the automaton grabbed Napoleon's piece and removed it from the board entirely. When Napoleon attempted a third mischief move, the Turk dramatically swept its arm across the board, knocking all the pieces to the floor in a show of mechanical irritation. Napoleon laughed in surprise at the machine's assertive personality. He then played a fair game and, after 19 moves against the relentless automaton, tipped over his king to concede defeat. This colorful anecdote, whether embellished over time or not, encapsulates the Turk's almost theatrical appeal. The machine was more than a mere sideshow curiosity. It had become a celebrity in its own right, mingling with the most powerful figures of the age and often humbling them at chess. By the early 19th century, the Turk's fame had spread across continents. After Wolfgang von Kempelen died in 1804, ownership of the automaton passed to a Bavarian musician and showman named Johann Malzel. Malzel, an entrepreneur known for inventing the metronome and other devices, saw great commercial potential in the chess automaton. He took the mechanical Turk on extensive new tours, first around Europe and later to the United States, drawing large crowds and charging admission to witness the marvel. Under Malzel's management, the Turk continued to notch victories. In 1826, Malzel brought the automaton to New York, introducing it to American audiences who were equally spellbound by a machine that could outthink the human mind. The tour across the U.S. was a hit with exhibitions in major cities. Newspapers eagerly reported on the automaton's games, and some skeptics issued playful challenges or threats to expose its secret. Notably, during the Turk's American tour, the famous author Edgar Allan Poe saw it in Richmond and became fascinated. Poe penned an essay in 1836 titled Malzel's Chess Player, in which he analyzed the machine's operation and cleverly deduced that a human must be hiding inside. From the very beginning, astute observers struggled to explain how the mechanical Turk could possibly play chess so well. Enlightenment Europe was familiar with impressive clockwork automata, but a machine that could handle a complex intellectual game in real time seemed almost unbelievable. Over the years, a lively debate raged in print and parlors over the Turk's true nature. Many theories were proposed, some insightful, others wildly imaginative. Perhaps one of the most far-fetched ideas is that a trained monkey was operating the mechanical Turk. Interestingly, a trained monkey that could beat chess masters might be one of the few things that would be more interesting than a robot that can do it. But maybe I'm just saying that because I live in a time when my grandma's ancient iPhone can beat Magnus Carlsen, and as far as I know, we're still waiting on a chess-playing monkey. In reality, the hoax was simpler than most wild theories. The mechanical Turk always had a human chess player hidden inside its cabinet. Kempelen's genius was in designing the cabinet with sliding panels, false backs, and removable parts, so that he could open every door to the audience without revealing the occupant. Kempelen showed the internal gears on one side. The operator would quietly shift into another compartment, often behind a panel or tucked into a corner behind props. Then, when the doors were shut and the game commenced, the operator would slide into position beneath the chessboard. Inside the dim cabinet, the hidden chess expert used a miniature chessboard to mirror the external game. The operator would control the Turk's arm via levers, cranks, or a pantograph-like mechanism connected to the Turk figure above. A candle or oil lamp inside provided the necessary light, with its smoke vented cleverly through the Turk figure's turban, disguised by incense or other smoke in the room. The Turk's machinery did include real clockwork, but these mechanisms were primarily there to sell the illusion. The true brain of the automaton was always a human mind, guiding every move from its concealed cockpit. Kempelen and his successors went to great lengths to keep the secret. The operators were sworn to silence, and they entered and exited the cabinet away from public view. Historians later identified several of the Turk's secret operators, though most of them remain unknown. This has led to all sorts of theories about who many of the operators could be, with some suggesting that great figures of the era may have wanted to play an anonymous game of chess. This leads to the rather unusual mental image of, let's say, Frederick the Great, the King of Prussia, stuffing himself inside the machine for some incognito chess. While the idea may sound far-fetched, the idea that someone with such an aura would want to play anonymously isn't a crazy idea. After all, no one was pulling their punches against the mechanical Turk. Everyone wanted to prove they could beat the machine. Others have suggested that at least one of the operators may have been a woman who wanted the opportunity to play chess with powerful male figures of the time. In the 18th century, women did occasionally play chess with men, but it was relatively rare and often limited by social conventions, especially in public or competitive settings. Further, there were a number of women, especially in Paris, who played chess at a high level, but their play was generally limited to matches between other women. Much like the idea of a monarch in the mechanical Turk, it's an interesting idea, but there's no evidence to confirm it directly. As the 19th century progressed, the mechanical Turk eventually met a fate as dramatic as its life. In the late 1830s, during a tour of Cuba, the Turk's then operator, William Schlumberger, fell ill and died, leaving Maelzel without his skilled co-player. A few months later, in 1838, Johann Maelzel himself died at sea, while en route back to Europe. The famous automaton was left orphaned, packed among Maelzel's belongings. When the ship returned, a friend of Maelzel took possession of the machine and eventually sold it to Dr. John Mitchell of Philadelphia. He happened to be Edgar Allan Poe's physician and a great fan of the Turk. Mitchell and a group of enthusiasts lovingly restored the now aging automaton and exhibited it a few more times in the early 1840s. By then, however, the novelty had begun to wane. The world was moving on to new wonders, and the Turk started to gather dust. Dr. Mitchell donated it to a museum in Philadelphia for safekeeping, which, to put it rather mildly, would be a mistake. There, the mechanical Turk sat quietly until tragedy struck. On July 5, 1854, a fire broke out in downtown Philadelphia and swept through the museum, engulfing the Turk. The fabled chess automaton was destroyed by the flames, bringing its 84-year career to an abrupt end. Only some external pieces, like the chessboard, survived, as they had been stored separately. Ironically, it was only after the Turk's destruction that its long-guarded secret was finally revealed to the public. In the aftermath of the fire, Dr. Mitchell's son, Silas Mitchell, felt that with the machine gone, there was no reason to conceal the truth of its operation. He penned a series of detailed articles in the Chess Monthly in 1857, explaining exactly how the mechanical Turk had been orchestrated by a human operator all along. Other former operators and associates soon chimed in with their recollections, confirming details such as the interior candle and sliding seat. The great chess-playing wonder of a bygone era was unmasked as an elaborate hoax, albeit one of the most ingenious in entertainment history. Yet, calling the mechanical Turk a mere fraud understates its importance. In truth, this automaton left an outsized legacy in both popular culture and the development of technology. The Turk spurred conversations about artificial intelligence long before that term existed. If a machine could mimic human thought in a strategy game like chess, people wondered what that implied about the boundary between man and machine. It wasn't just lay spectators who were intrigued. Notable inventors and thinkers drew inspiration from the Turk. In 1819, an aspiring English mathematician named Charles Babbage watched the mechanical Turk play in London. Babbage immediately recognized that the Turk was likely a trick, but the idea of a calculating machine that could truly play chess planted a seed in his mind. He began to imagine mechanical devices that could perform intellectual tasks through genuine computation rather than illusion. Within a few years, Babbage conceived his difference engine, and later the more general analytical engine, essentially designing the first mechanical computer. Babbage himself credited the Turk as an early influence that got him pondering whether a machine might actually think mathematically. In this way, the mechanical Turk, a fake thinking machine, helped kickstart real progress in computing machinery. It's perhaps one of the greatest butterfly effects of all time. An illusionist whose name has been forgotten to history puts on a show that bores the Holy Roman Empress to tears. A Hungarian noble promises to impress said Holy Roman Empress with some content that doesn't suck, to put it in modern terms. The only surefire way to do this is to build a hoax that's so captivating that for almost a century people question whether a collection of gears can really think. Then one of the greatest minds in history sees this machine in action decades after its creation and realizes that it can't do what they claim it's doing. He then realizes that a machine could actually do what the mechanical Turk claims to do, but that the technology isn't there yet. This madman then devotes the rest of his life to creating machines that can perform calculations. Flash forward to the 21st century, and here you are watching this video on YouTube, all because a forgotten illusionist put on a crappy, boring show for a Holy Roman Empress. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here, just reminding you to click that like button, subscribe, and share this video with your friends and family. Also feel free to check out the YouTube membership or my Patreon page to support my work more directly. The waves of the North Sea crept steadily toward King Canute's throne as he sat on the shore. Courtiers had flattered him that his power was so absolute. Even the ocean tide would halt at his command. Canute knew better, and as the cold water washed over his feet, the Viking king famously demonstrated that no mortal monarch could control the seas. Yet for a brief moment in the 11th century, Canute the Great did command nearly everything around the North Sea. He ruled England, Denmark, Norway, and even swayed parts of Sweden and Scotland, binding these far-flung kingdoms under his crown. Historians later dubbed this realm the North Sea Empire, evoking the image of a great Viking maritime empire. But was Canute's North Sea Empire really an empire in any true sense, or just a fleeting personal union held together by the will of one formidable man? To answer that, we need to dive into what the North Sea Empire was, how it formed, and what modern scholars say about its nature and legacy. The North Sea Empire refers to the personal union of the kingdoms of England, Denmark, and Norway under the rule of Canute the Great in the early 11th century. Rather than a single unified state, it was a collection of separate kingdoms, all governed by one man. Canute didn't proclaim himself a new emperor of a consolidated realm. Instead, he was concurrently King of England, King of Denmark, and King of Norway. Each kingdom retained its own laws and institutions. In essence, it was a sea-centered realm, whose parts were connected by the sea routes between them. The very name North Sea Empire is a modern historical construct. Early 20th century historians coined the term to describe Canute's dominion. Contemporary medieval people didn't use that grand title. They simply spoke of the individual kingdoms of England, Denmark, and Norway. So the label North Sea Empire gives an aura of imperial unity to what was, in reality, a personal dynastic union of crowns. Understanding this personal union is key to judging whether it was truly an empire. In a personal union, multiple distinct states share a ruler, but remain politically separate in most other respects. Each kingdom under Canute kept its own nobles, laws, and interests. They weren't merged into one administrative system. This was quite unlike, say, the Roman Empire, or even the Holy Roman Empire at its peak, where a central authority governed diverse lands. Canute's North Sea realm was held together by his personal power and charisma. the loyalty he could command, and the common waterways of the North Sea. With that context in mind, let's explore how this North Sea realm came to be, and how Canute managed to briefly unite these Viking Age kingdoms. The story begins with ambition and opportunism in the Viking Age. Canute's father, Sweyn Forkbeard of Denmark, had long harbored designs on the rich kingdom of England. England had been a target of Viking raids and Danish invasions for decades, and Sweyn himself successfully conquered England in 1013. At that moment, Sweyn briefly ruled over Denmark, Norway, and England, very briefly becoming the first to unite all three thrones. However, Sweyn's triumph was short-lived. He died suddenly in 1014, just weeks after becoming King of England. His nascent North Sea realm splintered on his death. The English nobility restored their ousted king, Ethelred the Unready, and in Scandinavia, Sweyn's elder son, Harold, took the Danish throne while Norway slipped away. The idea of a North Sea-spanning kingdom could have ended there, but Sweyn's younger son, Canute, was not about to let his father's vision die. Canute the Great, as he came to be known, was likely in his early 20s when Sweyn died, and he was already an experienced warrior prince. In 1014, Canute's first attempt to claim England met resistance. By 1015, he led a coalition of Vikings in a renewed invasion of England. England was in chaos. King Ethelred's rule had been weak and plagued by internal strife. After a series of battles, including a fierce clash at the Battle of Ashington in 1016, Canute defeated Ethelred's son, Edmund Ironside. The exhausted rivals struck a treaty to divide the kingdom, Canute taking the north and Edmund the south. But Edmund's sudden death late in 1016 left Canute as undisputed king of all England. On Christmas Day 1016, Canute was crowned in London as King of England, a Viking conqueror on the English throne. While he technically wasn't the first Viking king of England, that accolade goes to his dear old dad. Canute would reign for decades rather than weeks. Having secured England, Canute moved quickly to consolidate power. He eliminated or neutralized English nobles who opposed him and rewarded those who supported him. To strengthen his legitimacy, he married Emma of Normandy, the widow of Ethelred in a savvy political alliance, in 1017. Canute also kept paying the formidable Viking army that brought him victory, using hefty taxes to ensure the loyalty of these fighting men. By 1018, with the kingdom pacified and the Danes and Anglo-Saxons grudgingly united under his rule, Canute was fully recognized as King of England. England, with its wealth and efficient administration, became the crown jewel in Canute's budding North Sea domain. He often ruled from Winchester and relied on experienced Anglo-Saxon advisors, indicating that England was the power base of his empire. Meanwhile, events in Scandinavia soon handed Canute another crown. His older brother, King Harold of Denmark, died without an heir in 1018. Canute, as Sweyn Forkbeard's surviving son, claimed the Danish throne and sailed to Denmark in 1019 to assume kingship. There was little opposition. The Danish nobility accepted Canute, especially given his newfound wealth, and the battle-hardened army funded by English treasure. Now Canute was king of both England and Denmark, and as they presumably said at the time, everything's coming up Canute. With Denmark secure and Sweden checked, Canute turned to Norway, the third pillar of the North Sea Triad. Norway at the time was ruled by Olaf II, who was increasingly unpopular with his own nobles. Canute had already tried diplomacy. He offered Olaf the chance to govern Norway as Canute's vassal, which Olaf refused. In 1028, Canute assembled a massive fleet and sailed for Norway. Olaf couldn't face this onslaught. As Canute landed along the Norwegian coast, local chieftains by the fjords yielded and swore loyalty to Canute. In Trondheim, The Norse assembly acclaimed Canute as King of Norway. Olaf fled into exile, and just like that, in 1028, Canute added the crown of Norway to his collection. By 1028, Canute had indeed achieved an empire in scope. England, Denmark, and Norway were all under his rule. In the subsequent years, he would also acquire significant holdings in Scotland and Sweden, and would formally declare himself the king of the latter. By the early 1030s, Canute sat at the top of the North Sea world like a colossus, a northern emperor in all but name. Ruling such an empire was a delicate balancing act. Unlike a centralized empire, Canute's realms were separated by sea and had distinct cultures and traditions. Canute proved to be a shrewd and adaptable ruler. In England, he largely adopted Anglo-Saxon governance traditions. He kept the administrative system intact and even divided England into large earldoms to help govern it. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle notes Canute's frequent travels abroad, but little domestic strife in England. In Denmark and Norway, Canute ruled more indirectly. England was his primary residence and power base, so he appointed trusted regents to govern in his absence. Essentially, Canute's empire functioned as separate kingdoms loosely coordinated by one powerful king's directives. This is a fact that would become extremely problematic when that one king was no longer on the scene. To knit his domains closer, Canute did take steps toward integration. One notable policy was his use of England's advanced coinage and fiscal system to benefit Denmark. He introduced English-style coin minting in Denmark, hoping to modernize the Danish economy. Indeed, Canute's reign saw an attempt at a uniform currency type in both England and Denmark, which theoretically could have facilitated trade across the North Sea. However, the widespread use of coinage from the Holy Roman Empire in Scandinavia prevented this from fully taking hold. Still, the North Sea was briefly transformed into a Viking Mediterranean. Merchants could travel more safely between Canute's lands, ushering in a mini golden age of trade and prosperity. Canute was also able to play to the sensibilities of Christendom to show that he wasn't a syncretic northern barbarian who was secretly worshipping the old gods. Though Canute was Christian, the Anglo-Saxons knew that many of his men weren't, or practiced a form of Christianity that was heavily influenced by Norse paganism. However, he was a devout patron of the Church, which earned him acceptance by the formerly wary Christian Anglo-Saxon populace. In Scandinavia, he continued and accelerated the Christianization of Denmark and Norway, building churches and installing bishops, often English or friendly to English church interests. By favoring the Church, Canute won the approval of the Pope and Christian rulers in Europe, something no pagan Viking warlord could have achieved. Notably, in 1027, Canute made a famous pilgrimage to Rome. There he attended the coronation of Holy Roman Emperor Conrad II and achieved diplomatic triumphs. He secured lower tolls for travelers from his realms and forged an alliance with the empire. It's important to remember that this is the period of time where the Holy Roman Empire was the dominant force in Western Europe, not the decrepit entity it would later become. Conrad II even treated Canute as an equal at the imperial coronation, letting Canute stand beside him in the procession, a mark of great honor for the northern king. Canute's daughter was married to Conrad's son, the future Emperor Henry III, linking the North Sea royal house with the Holy Roman Empire's dynasty. These actions gave Canute's rule a legitimacy and prestige that went beyond brute force. He was accepted as a fellow Christian monarch in the club of European kings. For a Viking who began as a conquering invader, that was a remarkable transformation. He had brought peace and a measure of unity to territories that had known generations of conflict. However, The entire structure of the North Sea Empire rested on Canute's shoulders alone, and in 1035, that foundation was removed. When King Canute died in November 1035, the North Sea Empire collapsed with startling speed. The underlying weakness of a personal union became immediately apparent. There was no single imperial bureaucracy or unifying constitution to hold these kingdoms together beyond the person of Canute himself. Canute had intended for his realms to stay in his family, but he left an awkward succession. His sons Harthacanute and Harold Harefoot ended up quarreling over the spoils. After the dust settled, England was ruled by Harold Harefoot, Denmark remained with Harthacanute, and Norway went its own way. Harold Harefoot died in 1040, allowing Harthacanute to finally unite England and Denmark again, a brief echo of his father's union. But Harthacanute's reign in England was short and troubled. He gained a reputation for harsh rule, and he died in 1042 with no heir, and with him, Canute's dynasty ended. The English crown reverted to the native Anglo-Saxon royal line, with Edward the Confessor becoming king. The Danes ended up choosing a local prince to become king, and Norway continued on its own path as an independent kingdom. Thus, within less than a decade of Canute's passing, the North Sea Empire had disintegrated completely. The vision of a lasting Anglo-Scandinavian imperial state died with its architect. Historians often emphasize how ephemeral Canute's empire was, essentially held together from 1016 to 1035. The speed of its collapse underscores that it was never an integrated empire in the structural sense. There was no succession plan that could keep England, Denmark, and Norway united once different heirs vied for each. In short, Canute's empire was a one-man creation, and one man's passing unraveled it all in spectacular fashion. All this brings us back to the core question: was the North Sea Empire really an empire? Modern historians are somewhat divided in terminology, but generally converge on a consensus. Canute's North Sea realm is best understood as a personal union of three kingdoms, rather than a unitary empire. The term North Sea Empire is convenient shorthand, but it can be misleading. Canute never took the title of emperor, nor did he create a new imperial administrative framework that merged his kingdoms. Each of Canute's kingdoms remained virtually entirely distinct. The scholarly consensus emphasizes that politically and structurally, Canute's realm lacked the hallmarks of a true empire. There was no single imperial capital or bureaucracy uniting England, Denmark, and Norway. Canute ruled each according to its own customs, traveling between them as needed. The unity was personified in Canute, and didn't extend much beyond his court and army. Furthermore, the transient nature of the union is often cited as evidence that this was a temporary personal conglomeration, not a durable imperial system. That said, modern historians do acknowledge the impressive scope and influence of Canute's rule. While they might hesitate to use empire without caveats, they recognize that for a generation, one man managed to wield sovereignty from England to the edge of the Arctic Circle. In that sense, Canute's North Sea dominion was imperial in ambition, if not in formal structure. Some have drawn parallels to the later so-called Angevin Empire of the 12th century, the vast territories of England and western France under the Plantagenet kings. Like Canute's empire, the Angevin Empire was a collection of individual domains united by a monarch. In the final calculation, whether we call it an empire or not, Canute the Great's North Sea dominion was extraordinary for its time. It represented the peak of Viking Age political power. It was a moment when a Scandinavian ruler sat on the throne of England and dominated Scandinavia, forging a vast maritime kingdom linked by the North Sea. In the end, The North Sea Empire was an empire in ambition and geographic sweep, but not an empire in durability or administrative unity.